With that, I would like to introduce our next speaker. And he's no stranger to Purdue. And when I arrived here at Purdue, I heard a lot about you. And so Robert Weist, okay, he finished his bachelor's in 1962. And we all who teach here, we think that we are teaching all those things, and the students would leave and they do all those equations and use them. But on the contrary, he went to Esso Corporation, which is Exxon Mobil today. And he joined that as a young trainee in their intellectual property department, in their patent department. And when he started working there, and while he was doing that, he joined NYU, New York University, and got a degree in law, in intellectual property and corporate law, I think. And after he got the degree, then he joined CPC International, and he worked there for a few years. And after that, he joined a law firm in Chicago, and I think that's brought him to Chicago. I think that was the move from the East Coast to the Chicago, and he joined Chicago, and that was 1970. And the name of the firm was Marion Marshall et al. Okay, and he worked there, and he became partner in the company. Of course, a man of his intellect and stature, very quickly progressed, and was a partner in that corporation. But then he left that in 1976, went to Abbott Corporation. And there he headed the 4 divisions, law and intellectual property, the four of their big divisions. And while again, I think somehow he had in him, right? Wherever he went, if he stayed for more than 4 or 5 years, he had to attend a university to get a degree at time. So that's what happened again, and he was in Chicago obviously long enough, so he went to University of Chicago and got a executive MBA from there. And after his executive MBA, he became like one of the, and from the Abbott he left, and in 1982, he joined Amgen Corporation, and he was the 44th employee of the Amgen Corporation. Okay, so he was one of the founding members of Amgen Corporation, and very quickly he became the senior vice president and secretary and general counsel, and somehow, in 1989, at the age of 50, he decided to leave Amgen. And most of us would think that once you have achieved all these things and you have done all those wonderful things, you will take a nice retirement and settle down in life. But that's quite the contrary. I think he went even in a faster lane than he had been in the past. And he started a company called Weist Associates, and which was a business consulting company for biotechnology firms. Okay. And in the year 2005, he became an outstanding chemical engineering of our own department. So, and I was here at that time, so that's how I remember it. So it was very nice to welcome him back at that moment here. And he's the member of the Purdue Club in Chicago. He helps us out there. And most important, he also has a Weist Foundation. And the unique thing about that foundation is that it focuses on the educational aspects, the innovative education. It seeks the funding for innovation in education. And now that I'm at Purdue, we all appreciate that gesture very much, actually. And one interesting aspect which I forgot to mention is that when he was at Purdue, he took part in Grand Prix. Okay, so I need to touch base with you later on and find out more details. And maybe you all can ask him what he did at the Grand Prix. And then he has his a grandson and a granddaughter attending Purdue right now. So he's a true Boilermaker, okay? And so it's absolutely great to have that. And one final thing before I leave, and I let him tell you all about the entrepreneurship and all the great things he has done, is I should let you know that now he has a house in Hawaii on the Kauai Island, and he just became, right, and this is important, I think, he just last year he became the chairman of Kaloa Rum Corporation, okay, so that's really looking forward to next time looking at a bottle from that company on rum and see how someone enjoys it. And with that, the floor is yours.
Thanks. It's nice to be here as a small part of this historic celebration. I wanted to point out my legal training and put a disclaimer up there. Now, this talk or lecture is not going to be a scholarly review not the results of a research-based study, not a historical account of the biotech industry, and not an assessment of the current state of affairs in the biotech industry. I'll leave those very interesting subjects to the younger and more energetic observers. Rather, this is the abbreviated story of my experience and what I'll call a biotech engineer. I should probably pause at this point and give anybody the opportunity to go on to some other activities if the disclaimer disappoints them. So how did I end up being an entrepreneur? What preparation did I have when in 1982, at the tender age of 43, I embarked on a new career? What made me decide to leave a relatively secure position with a Fortune 500 company in my hometown to encounter the many unknowns of the Wild West? At the time, I was armed with the following academic credentials: a BS in chemical engineering from Purdue, a JD from New York University, and an MBA from the University of Chicago's executive program. And at that point, my work experience had included some 20 years, starting with summer employment while here at Purdue, in basically the type of chem engineering positions a young engineer might expect to encounter upon graduation. I spent one summer in a quality control lab, one in a production scheduling activity, one as an assistant shift foreman, all with the Armor & Company. When I got to my first full-time employment, it was, as mentioned earlier, with SO Research and Engineering. I had 8 years in various corporate patent positions, first with SO, and then with what was then Corn Products Company, now CPC International. That was followed by 7 years with the private practice of law with a law firm in Chicago. And finally, 5 years with Abbott Laboratories in various patent, general legal, and strategic planning positions. In 1981, two events more or less contributed or coincided that resulted in my decision to leave Abbott and try my hand at becoming part of a small team starting what would become eventually the world's largest biotech company, Amgen. The first of those two events was my completion of the executive program at the University of Chicago. That experience reinforced a growing entrepreneurial interest and armed me with the tools and the confidence to start taking some hopefully prudent risks. In fact, at the time, my mother asked, what did I learn from that University of Chicago program? My response was basically that risk is not necessarily a dirty word. The second event was what I call the Rathman factor. George Rathman was at the time a colleague with whom I had worked very closely at Abbott. A scientist by education, George's college physics professor was a fellow named Einstein. Before Abbott, George had 20 years of research, development, and managerial experience with first 3M and then Lytton Medical Systems. At Abbott, he had helped spearhead the growth of ADD, or Abbott's Diagnostic Division, also known uniquely within the company as the After Dark Division. and in the process helped transform Abbott as a corporation. As an aside, students of the history of the top management of the biotech industry, pioneering companies would find that Abbott, more than any other corporation, provided some of the executive alumni of its executive alumni to lead the way. For example, Kurt Robb at Genentech, Jim Vincent at Biogen, and Rathman at Amgen. George had done so by his intelligence, his energy, his leadership, sense of humor, charisma. He was and is one of my few heroes. So, when George told me that he had decided to leave Abbott, go to Thousand Oaks, California, to lead a startup company in the, quote, genetic engineering, end quote, field, it certainly got my attention. Not long thereafter, after some negotiations, due diligence, discussions with family, including an encouraging fortune cookie experience with Sally at our then favorite Chinese restaurant, I accepted George's offer to, among other things, trade in my corner office at Abbott for a construction trailer at Amgen and become employee number 44 and part of Amgen's top management team. Over the years at Amgen, we raised $400 million from the capital markets before Amgen had a product on the market or any earned revenue. We successfully established and defended important patent positions. We established strategic partnerships with Abbott, Kirin Beer, and Johnson & Johnson. We navigated the clinical trial and FDA approval processes. We went to market with two what became blockbuster pharmaceutical products, which dramatically improved the quality of life for numerous patients around the world. We created thousands of jobs in the process. And last but not least, we provided some very handsome returns to our shareholders. By 1990, my personal priorities had started to change. Amgen was a real company, ready for a more professional style of management team. George Rathman had moved on. I had turned 50, observed the birth of my first grandchild, and decided it was time to at least pause and smell the roses. So I also moved on. Sally and I embarked upon home building projects in Kauai and Lake Tahoe. Now, just a word or two about the post-Amgen, pre-Kaloa rum experience. For the last decade, from a professional standpoint, I'd formed Weist Associates, a biotech-related consulting firm, and was the founding consultant and acting CEO for HiSeq, which was a startup genomic sequencing company, and served on the board of directors of various development stage life science companies. I hope that answers the question of where or how did I learn my lessons. And with that, I'd now like to move on to the lessons. I've picked 7 of the main lessons that I think I've learned along the way that I hope you'll find us some. The right stuff. Not everyone would be happy as an astronaut or as an entrepreneur. In addition to being self-motivated, having the requisite instincts, opportunistic, can-do attitude, to succeed requires combining expertise and experience with energy and commitment. The latter often requires a delicate balancing of priorities. The team. First and foremost, a respected team leader is essential. The management team, because of its generally scarce resources, should be kept lean and mean, and team members often wear more than one hat. For example, at Amgen, I was initially Vice President of Administration, as well as Corporate Secretary and General Counsel. Selective use of outside advisors and a diverse, supportive, and experienced board of directors can act as sounding boards and provide welcome input to the management team. And of course, if the team is focusing on a technical or scientific goal, you need a few Purdue engineers or other scientists. The work environment should be, in my experience, open, not secret, or need-to-know communications, which builds trust and teamwork and creative interchanges. It should be an environment where everyone feels they have a stake. They should be recognized and rewarded, for example, stock options, where everyone feels they have a piece of the action. That environment is going to be characterized by hard work, long hours, burning the midnight oil, and last but not least, it should also be fun. Work hard, play hard, a good motto. That's what we tried to do at Amgen. For example, we'd have a regular monthly fermentation seminar at the end of the day on Friday where everyone seemed to enjoy. Financing. The uncertainty of product development schedules, progress of clinical trials, for example, and timing of regulatory, for example, FDA approval, make financial planning, and especially cash burn, a constant challenge to startup and development stage companies. Closely monitoring burn rates, as well as understanding access to capital markets, is essential. In addition, and preferably experienced CEO and CFO, a company is well advised to cultivate contacts with investment bankers, CPAs, and outside securities counsel, whose day-to-day activities give them important insights into financial market conditions and timing. In the case of Amgen, we relied on all of the above, and also had the benefit of some board members who were venture capitalists or VCs, and made it an important part of their businesses to closely monitor the status of, for example, the initial public offering market. Nowhere is a sense of urgency more important than in the planning and execution of decisions regarding raising capital. For example, in 1983, when Amgen was making good progress with its development projects, it found itself burning through cash faster than earlier planned. What to do? Management got the direction from the board to present, quote, contingency plans. For example, layoffs. At the time, however, the capital markets, including the IPO market, that is the initial public offering market, was very receptive to the technology sector in general. And our discussions with Smith Barney, Montgomery Securities, and other investment bankers convinced our management team that we should go all out to go public. That process in itself could be the separate subject of a seminar or a book or two. Amgen did have a successful IPO in the sense of raising the necessary capital. Fortunately, our timing was such that the window stayed open just long enough for us to complete the offering. In less than 2 weeks thereafter, the window slammed closed. As market sentiment regarding technology in general and biotechnology turned bearish, and it was another 18 months before that situation started to change. We'd have been out of business, or certainly out of cash before that. As a public company, and therefore a more liquid entity, the subsequent financing alternatives after our initial public offering became more numerous. But timing was still a very key consideration, and another consideration became dilution was a factor which came up in discussions of do we raise more capital, and if so, when and how much. In Amgen's case, we decided to follow the advice of one of our senior venture capitalist directors. He believed that capital markets, when they were favorable, or what he called passing the peas, then the company was well advised to be a polite guest and accept a reasonable helping. That is, raise the capital, notwithstanding some further dilution. Next, I wanted to talk about strategic partners. Often, an entrepreneurial company is well advised to seek one or more strategic partners who may, for example, accelerate product development or market entry. In Amgen's case, we established important partnerships with Abbott, Kirin Beer of Japan, and Johnson & Johnson. We spent considerable time, effort, and other resources in establishing and managing those relationships. We dealt with numerous conflicts. In summary, my take-home lessons for the entrepreneur in dealing with strategic partners are: one, comparable objectives or compatible objectives. Make sure that there aren't any hidden agendas. Mutual respect for your partner. It's important in any relationship. Due diligence should include check the track records of your prospective partner. And finally, managing the relationships once established can require considerable time, even with the right chemistry and individuals involved. Next, I wanted to say a word or two about patents. Proper patent strategy can be extremely important in securing a competitive advantage. Timely actions with input from experienced counsel can be the difference between success and failure. My bottom line advice, don't spare the resources there. In Amgen's case, we very diligently pursued securing and then enforcing the company's patent rights, and it paid off handsomely. Finally, lesson number 7, the payoff, brings me to the conclusion of my lessons. After all the blood, sweat, and tears the successful entrepreneur typically encounters, what about the overwhelmingly positive things also? In my case, I took enormous pride in seeing the patient benefits resulting from Amgen products. It was also a good feeling to know that we had created many new jobs and that our shareholders were being rewarded for risking their capital. In conclusion, as I reflect on my experience, it's apparent that my chem engineering experience at Purdue was the foundation upon which I built my career, qualified me to eventually become a patent attorney, which in turn led me to entrepreneurship. It also taught me how to solve problems employing process-type approaches. My thanks to my chemie classmates and professors. And also thank Arvine for this invitation and for your leadership of the school. Also thanks to Christina for her help in setting up this wonderful event. As mentioned briefly earlier, my current interest in trying to apply some of my experience involves the Hawaiian island of Kauai, where Sally and I are the principal owners of the Kaloa Rum Company. Our old Kaloa town was the historic site of the first sugarcane mill in the Hawaiian Islands. Here to tell you about KRC, or Kaloa Rum Company, from the perspective as our recent summer intern, I'm proud to introduce Purdue student and my grandson, Robert Raymer.
Thank you, Grandpa. Growing up and being around my grandfather for a significant portion of my life has really taught me all of the highs and lows of being an entrepreneur. From the long and sometimes random hours that he had to work to some of the more interesting people that he worked with came stories. Now, I'm sure that I've heard almost every story 4 or 5 times, and every time he tells it like I've never heard it before. I listen every time. Well, this summer, I got a chance to step into my grandfather's shoes when he suggested that I complete an internship at his newest venture, Kaloa Rum Company. I was really excited to get to spend the summer in Hawaii. Well, who wouldn't be? What I thought was going to be a relaxing summer of laying on the beach and playing a lot of golf actually turned out to be the most fun yet challenging summer of my life. From the first step I took into Kaloa Rum Company, I could see evidence that it was a company that my grandfather was involved in. I was able to witness firsthand a lot of the same lessons that he just talked to you about. The first thing I noticed when I walked in was that there was only 4 full-time employees, keeping with the lean and mean strategy. In just the first few days, I learned that everyone was very open with communication. The only person that has a door on his office is the president, and that's only because his office doubled as the conference room. Everyone pretty much yelled across the office if they needed something, just all across or anything along those lines. So over the course of my internship, the 2 biggest things that I saw and experienced that really reflected my grandfather's work were the long hours and hard work that everybody put in and the ability to have fun while doing so. As an intern, I was asked to come to work at 8 a.m. every day. Fairly early, I thought, but that's okay. It was a job, after all. Well, each morning when I had arrived, the production manager, Mike, had already been in and working for 2.5 hours, and the front office people had already been in for an hour working. And when I left each afternoon at 4, all 4 of them, were still there hard at work and would stay until 5 or 6 every night. Now, when it came to fun, though, Kaloa Rum Company really knew how to do that. From taking surfing trips, to having company lunch outings, to playing simple, harmless, practical jokes on each other, working for Kaloa Rum Company was the most fun and best work experience that I've ever had. With having worked there for a summer and knowing that my grandfather and grandmother, when it gets really serious, is backing the company, I know this will be another ultra-successful venture for them and hopefully for myself someday very soon. Thank you all very much, and a special thanks to my grandma and grandpa for this unique experience. I love you guys.